Hello, welcome to our podcast for today. I'm Randall Craig, the CEO of the BrainTrust Professional Institute, and today we are talking about developing a coaching style of leadership, which is very interesting to me and to many of the people that we work with. Um, quick little bit, the BrainTrust Professional Institute, we work with leaders either as coaches or running leadership retreats specifically for organizations. We also have a number of resources and training materials as well. So that's what we do. For me, I've advised over 100 organizations. I'm inducted into the Canadian Speaking Hall of Fame. I'm a fellow certified management consultant, although I do not do consulting anymore, just because I think coaching is a little bit more effective for knowledge transfer. And at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, we do help organizations figure out how to get that next level. So, uh, with no further ado, what I wanted to do is talk about the concept today of being a coaching leader. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to start with some opening remarks. I've got a bunch of concepts, and I'll open the floor to your questions. I'm on the hot seat. Any question about this, whether it's a situational one or a conceptual one, is okay. Um, I think that most leaders kind of understand the basics, but sometimes you miss little bits and pieces along the way in your journey into that leadership role. So if I go over one or two things that you've already said, you can and already understand, you can say, yes, I know that. It was a good reminder. The first thing I would say is to ask for each of you, what is your leadership focus? Is it people or task? And there's a spectrum. And very much the people are people focused. They're all about the people. And we got to motivate them and everything. The people are tasked is, hey, we got a job to do here. And the reason why you are hired is to do that job. Right. And of course, nobody is at one end or the other. There's a bit of a spectrum and everything. So the question is, okay, where you are in that spectrum, what would happen if you just moved over a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right? And what difference would that make in terms of how others see you as a leader, but also your effectiveness? And it's very easy just to try that out. Okay, if you've got something when you're having a conversation with somebody, you say, what would happen if I was a little bit more task focused? What would happen if I was a little bit more people focused? When it comes down to it, there is effectively two models of leadership that I wanted to share with. One, which has got its start really from the military over the last literally hundreds of years. It was the command and control. The general says something, and then the next level says, yes, sir. And then the next level, and the next level, and the next level. And then eventually the person at the very bottom is doing something. They have no idea why they're doing it. Okay, but they were told from their boss, who's told from their boss, etc. And certainly, after World War II, and I know that this is a long time back, that military type of leadership actually got transposed in the corporate, government, and not-for-profit sectors. This is the best way to actually lead. And of course that it isn't, okay? But very often we're taught by our bosses in the past, or we've seen it, that that's the way that one should manage. And the other one, which you may have heard under various terms, servant leadership, lead from behind, becoming a coaching type leader. That's what we're talking about today. And I don't know of any CEO, founder, executive director that I've worked with who is a command and control type boss. Sometimes there's tendencies, sometimes you want to use that lever when you need to, but pretty much everybody aspires to being that servant leader, that coaching leader, the leader who supports, etc. And by the way, isn't it funny when we think about doing the org chart? Okay, we always put the the boss at the top and then their lieutenants and so on and so forth. Servant leadership of becoming a coaching leader flips it upside down and says, our job as leaders is to support those above us, whose job is to support those above them, and so on and so forth. Right? Of course, you're setting the strategy and everything that's part of your roles and responsibility, but your job is to support others, etc. So I've always found it interesting that the org charts, why when we talk about this, why don't we flip the org charts as well? So that is the second point that I wanted to make. The third point I wanted to make is I wanted to I don't want to say put together a little bit of a case study, and I want to share with you a typical management conversation, and maybe you've had this conversation with your direct reports or others that you deal with. Here's your task. You say, you need to achieve X, Y, Z. Then you say, call so and so and so and so to get their perspective. Then let's meet in 2 weeks to check in on progress, which, by the way, is short, it's sweet, it's supportive, and it's snappy, and it's very clear because you're giving them some ideas. Call these people, etc. You're checking in on them because you want to be supportive. And I guess the question I would ask there is can we do better? I would suggest that this conversation that I just outlined is directive. And if you want to sort of think about it, there's three types of conversations that we can have as leaders. One are directive statements, do this, then do that, and then do this other thing. Those are directive statements. Even if they're phrased in sort of friendly terms, they're saying, I'm the boss and this is what you should do. Not this is what I want you to do. In fact, you're required to do it because I'm telling you, right? That's a directive statement. The other kind of statement is what I call open-ended questions, which isn't really something that other people don't call as well. But open-ended questions are ones that um, don't mean that a yes or no answer will be coming up, right? They require somebody to say something. Um, did you have a good day today? Is a yes, no, closed-ended question. Um, Tell me about your day today is an open-ended question. They can't answer yes or no. They have to do a little bit bigger. One of the interesting thing is when you say yes, no, it's a very simple thing. You work unit are providing me the answer, yes, no. Okay, when we say an open-ended question, you're asking them to sort of fill in the blanks, and you may learn the darndest things because what's important to them and what they're thinking about, etc., ends up coming out with open-ended questions. The third type of conversation, and call this the coaching conversation roadmap. The third type I call the I wonder statements. I wonder statements are statements that are a little bit more, I wonder if this or this or whatever. I wonder, you're not being judgmental. Sometimes staff who've been laboring under a command and control directive kind of thing for their entire professional careers will take your I wonder statements to be directive. Oh, the boss is saying that. I wonder if that's the way if that's what they really want, right? But doing the I wonders a bunch of times and saying, I don't know if this is exactly makes sense. You're the best person to probably make the call. I wonder if such and such. I'm wondering if you considered it. Okay, I wonder if you have thoughts on this. Okay, and and the I wonder ifs are absolutely wonderful. That particular technique is if you're doing any facilitation or if you're in a group meeting with your team, just using the I wonder statements is a great way to get feedback. And if you've got people on your team, by the way, that tend to be a little bit more critical, a great thing to do is actually introduce the I wonder statements for everybody, saying, hey, listen, if you got a concern about something, rather than talking about the concern directly, why don't you say, I wonder if? Okay, I wonder if. And if everyone in the group starts to say, I wonder if so and so, I wonder if so and so, it becomes less of a defensive mechanism when the person receives what might have otherwise been considered criticism. So for you as the leader, the coaching conversation roadmap, from my perspective, is really how much and when do you do these directive statements because they are necessary sometimes, open-ended questions, and I wonder it. So, pardon me. So let me replay this conversation again. Okay. And that conversation, just so we remember, here's your task, achieve this. Meet these people and just get their perspective. Then let's meet in a couple of weeks and I'll, give you some feedback. What if this was like it? What if this were the conversation? We must achieve XYZ before the next quarterly project review. Okay, that's a directive statement, isn't it? Right? And then listen to all these I wonder statements. These open-ended questions. How does this new goal fit with your other priorities? What's the biggest challenge in achieving XYZ? What are your initial thoughts on where to start? How might we mitigate any risks? Um, when do you think we'll see some early wins from this? Where do you need support from me? All of a sudden, okay, the monkey is now no longer on your back. You're the coaching leader, okay, and you're saying all these things to pull out from that person's, getting them starting to think about how they might actually achieve it, right? Those are open-ended questions. Here's some I wonder questions that you might ask as well. I wonder if so and so would be helpful. Thoughts? I wonder if speaking to so and so could shed some light on it or not. These are not judgmental. These are not directive. These are not saying they're not open-ended questions because the answer is kind of yes or no. Okay. And then maybe you end up with, let's meet in 2 weeks to check in on progress. Because you're saying, yeah, I want to make sure that A, things aren't going off the rail, but also I just want to make sure things are moving along, right? Maybe there's some things based on the open-ended questions that I can sort of help along with, et cetera. But in 2 weeks, let's do an update. Let me let me let me just um, let me just stop for a moment. I've got a few other thoughts as well on becoming a coaching style leader or embedding more of it into your daily. But let me ask, does anyone have any thoughts? You could unmute if you'd like, or you could put something into the chat if you'd prefer. Any thoughts on what we've gone over so far? No, not really. Okay. Well,
I have a fairly new team, and so I'm always cautious because I find when people are new, they come in with so many ideas that you want to be able to leverage that, but also recognizing they're still learning our environment and what works and doesn't work. So it's always a bit of a balancing act there.
can I just elaborate on something you said because I just love it. Okay, here we are. Okay, we have our way of doing things. It's been tested, it's true. We're doing it because it addresses the needs of all these stakeholders. We're doing it because we understand the budget constraints, we understand the time constraints, etc. And then you've got somebody new who comes in who frankly doesn't know any of that. And they say the darndest things. They ask questions they that maybe nobody's really asked before. They want to try stuff that we've done it before. Okay. And they look at things and they say, I don't know. And what's going on in their mind right now? Every time we as leaders say SWAT, SWAT, no, 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 okay, they say this isn't a place that's open for innovation. Gee, I don't have any leeway. Gee, they don't respect me. Gee, they don't. And it goes on and on with all these like awful things, etc. And so, you know what? There's a concept called killer phrases. It's all right in theory. Well, don't start anything yet. Well, it won't work. Well, we've tried it before. That sounds a little complex. Wait for another month or two. 2 years ago we tried that. It blew up. Well, guess what? Things are different, right? So my suggestion is this: is in your orientation, you do two things. Number one is you push the concept of the reason why we've hired you is because we respect everything that you're bringing to the table. We love the idea of bringing in new blood. We love the idea of innovation. That's where we want to move our culture to innovation, etc. And say to them, there's some things that we've done that'll make no sense to you. And there's some things that we're doing that, if you brought it up to me, they'd make no sense to me either. But you've got this 3 months, 3 months of having fresh eyes. After 3 months, everything will kind of be whatever. Let's meet in a couple of weeks and let's see what you've noticed. what are some things that maybe we need to relook at? Like the obvious stuff really right now has to do with AI and the implementation of that and so on and everything. And give them some time where they can actually come back to you and say, here's some stuff I noticed. And then you can sort of say, you know what, why don't we try and experiment? That one area, etc. How would you do that? Okay. And you give them permission to do that kind of thing. So when you say, no, 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 because of compliance, because of budget, because of timing, etc., or some stakeholder issue, you can't do that. There'll be almost this countervailing force between how you've empowered that new hire and how you haven't. Now, sometimes it's not you as the leader that's got the problem. Okay. They work with all their peers, perhaps other leaders, perhaps some other support staff, etc. And other people don't want to change. And this speaks to the question of how you, as the leader, wish to embed a culture of innovation, of acceptance, of creativity, okay, a culture of coaching as opposed to commanding within the culture of the organization. No organization's culture is static. It's either going up or it's going down. It's going in this direction, it's going in that direction. Not good or bad, just different directions. But as leader, this is something that we're able to do. And certainly by modeling these coaching behaviors, I think the new hire thing and the incredible opportunity of fresh eyes is what brings new life into an organization. I think too often we're focused as leaders on the task that the person is doing, as opposed to the innovation and the new thinking that they might bring. And I think there's a real opportunity. Sorry for going off on a little bit of a tangent, Christina, but I think it really is an opportunity. Now, let's say you've got somebody for 3 or 4 months in, and they're just like a loose cannon. Okay, you got to pull them back a little bit, right? And not say, hey, this is the way it's done. Okay, but I would say let's talk about why we do certain things and where there's flex and where there's not flex. And if you deal I guess let me use an analogy. Um, One of the biggest differences between the tax code of United States and the tax code of Canada is this. In the United States, the tax code, which will fill like walls and walls of books, it speaks to very specific rules. Okay, you can't do this, you can't do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, can't do. Okay, the Canadian tax code is filled with principles. You can't cheat on your taxes is a principle. Okay. So if we think about what are the principles we want to embed with respect to um, the folks who are, I don't want to say loose cannons, right? But the people who are a little bit more flexible. Okay, that might be more helpful if they truly understand the principles, because if they do go sort of off the path, you can say, listen, okay, the reason why we got to sort of pull back here or maybe redirect the energy over here is because of this principle, as opposed to this gazillion rules. If that helps.
Yes, what I did was I set up a team. So all the managers, including all our new ones, go meet once every other week. Think about, I felt like that would be like balancing without me being involved, and then they can come up with solutions with, the older ones would say, hey, like this, that, or the other, like this works, this. So it's not coming from me, it's coming from their peers. And I thought I'm waiting to see what the results will be because we just implemented that, but I'm curious to see how that will work. I was just kind
I
of.
love it. I love it. I love it. Let me just grow that point, Christina. Another thing that works very often quite well is the concept of reverse mentoring. So, for example, you have the new people mentor the old people. Well, guess what? The veterans, I shouldn't say old people, because what will happen in that, there'll be a lot of learning that goes actually in both directions.
Mhm.
Having the younger people, having the new hires versus the people who've been there for a long time, having the younger people with the more mature people. By the way, sometimes if you're doing any kind of job enrichment, career enrichment, where you're getting people to transfer and build other skills in other areas, either for backup or for career progression and everything, it becomes a lot easier if those mentorship, reverse mentorship relationships outside the regular kind of structural reporting relationships have already been built in. So that's another way you could do that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're very, very welcome. Um, any other comments? Any other questions? Nope. Yes. Nope. Let me go on then. Okay. I think one of the very interesting things when it comes to becoming a coaching leader is how you end up giving feedback. And I think that there's a difference between how we give feedback in a command and control kind of mode versus that servant leadership coaching type of mode. And I'll give you two little nuggets here. Number one is what does that accountability conversation actually look like? Because very often the accountability conversation is one like, you screwed up. Okay, how could you have done this kind of thing? Well, sometimes we don't use those words, but as leaders, sometimes we think those words, right? And it shows in our body language and our face and all that kind of stuff. Here's a framework that I know works very well. This is what was, hey, so and so, let's talk about this. This is what was expected. This is what happened. I need to understand the underlying reasons why. Okay. Well, because this happened, uh, bec because such and such happened, this is the outcome, i.e., because you didn't do this is what it's meant. How can we prevent it in the future? Okay. And then sometimes, if non-performance happens again, this will be the result. You know, I think in a certain sense, the question of, task versus person in that accountability um, conversation, the focus has got to be on the task, not the person. Because as soon as we start talking about the person, but privately to yourself, you got to focus on the person, not the task. Gee, is there some issue going on here? Is there some structural reason why this person is not performing? Is there some other supports that I need to put in place to make sure that that person is successful doing their job, etc.? Is this a one-time thing? Is it kind of something that repeats over and over again, or happens at certain times, etc.? How do I deal with the systemic issue that might underlie that non-performance? Because that systemic issue is causing other people to non-perform as well. So the idea of saying, okay, conversations focus on the task. Okay. And obviously if it's a small thing, you're not going to have this big conversation. If it's a big thing, you're going to obviously have a much larger conversation. But the idea of separating person from task and sort of how you deal with it is actually something interesting. I think the other sort of nugget I want to leave you with is the question of team member feedback. What's your goal when you give feedback? Too often we don't think about it. Okay, so let me give you some ideas. Is it, say, the quick resolution of the issue? Is it recognition of achievement of an objective? Is it recognition of positive behavior? The more you recognize positive behavior, obviously, the more that behavior you're going to get. Is it to hold somebody accountable for non-achievement? Is the goal to change negative behavior? Is the goal to build business acumen within that employee? Is the goal to build leadership capacity within that employee? Is the goal to help under a bigger succession planning kind of mindset? So if you take a look at those, what, four, five, six, seven, what, about eight different goals, and by the way, I'm sure you could think of a whole bunch of other ones, then it becomes a lot easier for you to say, okay, in the context of what my goal is for giving that feedback, now let me have that conversation. What's interesting is by sort of putting some of these other things on the table, like building business acumen or building leadership capacity or where it fits in larger succession planning, you know, all of a sudden we're saying that, hey, I'm not just concerned for the task at hand, although sometimes you might be, right? You're not concerned about a negative or positive behavior, reinforcement or correction. Okay, although you might be, but it means that gee, you can kill a few birds with one stone. You can kill a whole bunch of birds with one stone. And it does not need to be a kludgy. It could be just a simple conversation, right? And I think it's a very exciting kind of thing because, too often we're concerned about results, right? Or making sure people are happy, retention, kind of an important thing, right? So understanding kind of what the context of the feedback is kind of important as well. Any questions? Comments? Nope. Okay. So uh, we've already talked about killer phrases. Okay. Those phrases that just kill initiative dead. Okay. And once people are sort of shut down a bunch of times, of course, that becomes the culture of the place. Okay. That, speaks to the um, relationship between the people who are killing the ideas and the people who are maybe coming up with the ideas and everything. I want to talk about the kind of engagement your team members actually have on the job. Now, there's some people who are very positively engaged. They're sharing ideas. There's clarity. There's purpose. They do teamwork. They use, responsible language. They take the initiative. They ask what they want. They take pride in their work. Okay, those are the great employees. Those are the great staff members. On the other hand, there's those who are negative. They're complaining and blaming. This is the negative engagement, which obviously is, you don't want. I'm going to suggest that in both those cases, the positive engagement and the negative engagement, they're both engaged. Okay. And in a certain sense, if you got this between the two, right here, down there, is what's called the trough of apathy, when people just don't care. Have you ever had somebody that you've noticed has just checked out, right? They're there in body, but they're already not there in mind. They're drawing a paycheck. They're just sort of putting in time. There's no positive engagement. There's no negative engagement. They're just doing nothing. That is what you want. People who feel strongly and are negative and complaining and blaming, those people you could do something about, right? You could coach them. Okay, you could set expectations. Okay, you could help them understand what the impact is of the negativity and the complaining and the blaming. You could sort of put your ego aside and you could say, 1 second, if there's smoke, maybe there's fire. Let me look seriously into what they're complaining about, what that negativity is about. And maybe you could sort of solve the problem at root, but they care. The people that don't care, those are the people that you need to worry about. Because if you're not able to move them into that sort of positive engagement space, then what are they doing? Okay, and it's not a reflection of you. Okay, although leadership does make a difference. But if you want to get 110% out of people, if you want to make sure that the impact that they have externally as well as with their peers is a good one. We can't have anyone in the trough of apathy. So, you're not going to be able to command them to be interested in their job. You can't command somebody to care. But what you can do is you could use some of those coaching conversations we've been talking about to try and get a sense of what's going on, right? Certainly with respect to what expectations, and we're not talking about non-performance. It's really more just they're ticking the boxes and not doing what they want. So apathy is very difficult, but it's also a leadership opportunity.